Hey juniors, this video is about letters of recommendation. So in this video, we're going to discuss what letters are, do you need them, and ultimately how to request them. So do you even need a letter of recommendation? Well, if you're planning to apply to a Texas public university, most of them do not require them for admission. They're going to be completely optional. And so if you know that you have automatic admission to a university based on your class rank and your test scores, you certainly don't need a letter of recommendation. But if you're applying to a school like UT and A&M are going to be our most selective public universities, and sometimes some of you may fall just outside the automatic admissions requirements. So a letter of recommendation may help you if it's going to provide additional information that you're not already providing in your application. So they will accept up to 2 letters. But for the most part, they really do rely more on the information that you provide in your application. Selective universities, however, a lot of the private schools will require at least 2 letters, mostly because their admissions is going to be more of a holistic approach. So Rice University, for example, very selective university, they're going to require 2 teacher recommendations and 1 counselor recommendation. And many scholarships, so if you're thinking about applying to scholarships, you're definitely going to need letters. I've seen up to 3 letters of recommendation required for scholarships. So the purpose of the letter of recommendation is to provide qualitative information. So a lot of times the applications that you submit are going to include a lot of quantitative information like activities and test scores and grades. Aside from essays, teacher letters can provide more of that qualitative information. And so a teacher's letter really is going to put the student within the context of the classroom. So how did they perform in the classroom? Were they a leader in the class? Were they insightful? Did they participate? All those kinds of things. And then a counselor letter is going to provide some information about the student within the context of the school. So I'll give you an example. If I had to write a letter for a student and they had on their resume that they were involved in student council and National Honor Society, I might give some information about how National Honor Society on our campus is a very selective organization, and they do have a lot of requirements. Student council as well. And many of you know that student council does a lot for our school. So that's the kind of information that a counselor can provide, whereas a teacher may not be able to provide that information. So all of that is the purpose of that letter, is to just give more context to the student as opposed to what's provided in that application. This is just an excerpt from UT Austin's website where they discuss their letters of recommendation. So I thought you might find that useful. So I've given you the link so that you can read more on that. So whom to ask for a letter of recommendation. So, you're going to use your letters again, either for college applications or scholarships. So they're all going to involve academics. So you definitely want to ask a teacher, an academic teacher. So from a class where you excelled, someone who knows you well. And then if possible, you're going to want to ask a teacher who teaches in a subject closely aligned with your major that can speak to, how you might perform when you're in college. If you're involved in extracurriculars, and maybe you're a leader in your activities, you can definitely ask a sponsor or a coach to write a letter for you, and they can speak to how you perform in that context. And I know this may seem obvious, but as someone who likes you, I think every teacher has that one example of an awkward moment where a student that maybe was rude to you or did not perform well in the class, ask for a letter. It is very awkward, but you definitely want to just be thoughtful of from who you request a letter. So how do you go about requesting a letter? So it's always best to ask in person. One, it'll give you some cues, social cues as to whether they like you or not. Hopefully when you ask them, they're going to say, yay, yes, of course not, no problem. But in this COVID world, sometimes it's not convenient to ask in person. So if that's not possible, then send a well-written email. If you don't know what that is, Google it. You need to make sure you know how to write an email. When you make your request, it's always best to give your teacher or counselor a copy of your high school resume. This is going to give your teacher or your counselor some good information aside, to kind of compare you in terms of, what they've seen, what they've witnessed in the classroom or at school. And, just like I said, provide context. For counselors, a lot of times your counselors don't know you very well. So we might ask you for the response to some open-ended items. I'm going to be updating my website with some of that information, so stay tuned for that. Or you can provide a writing sample. I often ask students to give me writing samples because that will help me since I do not see students, in that academic environment. But one of the big things is you definitely want to give your recommender enough time to write you a good letter. There's nothing worse than having a student ask you for something that's due the next day. That's awful. You're just asking for something that's just hastily done, and it's not going to be good. So make sure you give your teacher or your counselor at least minimum 3 weeks, if not more. If you're watching this video, you're awesome. You're probably going to ask them, and the teacher or the counselor is going to have a whole summer to write the letter if they choose to. So once you get those letters, how do you submit those letters? So each school or scholarship is going to have their own specific set of instructions. And so, some colleges, it's part of the application process. So if you're applying using the Common App application, the recommendation is part of the process. So what you do is you enter your teacher's email and your counselor's email, and then they will receive an email from Common App prompting them to make that recommendation. Some colleges, like UT, for example, you can upload a letter on your own through your college portal. So after you apply to a college, you're usually going to get access to an account where you can check all the items that you submit. And through that same account, you can submit letters of recommendation. So UT, for example, not only can you submit a letter, but you can also just send a link to your recommender so that they can upload the letter for you. Some organizations, whether it's a school or a scholarship, it might have to be sent via snail mail. So every college and scholarship is going to be different. But the one thing that may affect all of this is whether or not your recommender is okay with you reading their letter. So, if your teacher doesn't want you to read the letter, not that it's a bad letter or anything, they may just tell you, oh, let me send it on your behalf, or give me the email address for that Office of Admissions instead. So keep that in mind. So what now? What you should be doing now is start researching those colleges that you're planning to apply to and figure out, well, what are the requirements? Do I need a letter? And if I need a letter, how do I go about submitting it? And start getting ready to request those letters. So by compiling a high school resume and making sure you have the correct email address for your teacher or your counselor, this is super important, because if on Common App you do not submit the correct email, you're just waiting and your counselor never got the email from Common App, or your teacher never got the email. So it is important that you do have the correct email address for your recommenders. And then if you request a letter now, like I said earlier, your teacher or your counselor can hold on to the letter for you until you need it, or they can provide copies for you so that you can use at your discretion, especially as you're applying to scholarships, etc. But don't take my word for it. Here's a great video by Khan Academy presented by college admissions officers from selective universities. So I hope you check it out.